The Straits Times has released the 352-page book marking the first 2 years of Singapore's fight against COVID-19. In this Together, Singapore's COVID-19 story is divided into two parts: saving lives and saving livelihoods. Our journalists spoke to more than 300 people, including Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, President Halimah Yacob, Cabinet Ministers, frontline workers, volunteers, foreign workers and survivors. Now you'll read about stories of suffering and resilience and of miscalculation and foresight. One of the 13 chapters features 24 people who saved the life of one woman, Madam Tan, who caught COVID-19. Joining me now are ST's Executive Editor Sumiko Tan, who edited the book, and Health Correspondent Timothy Goh, who wrote several segments in the book. Sumiko, start us off first. How did the idea to write a COVID-19 book come about, and what makes this book different from other COVID-19 accounts?
Hi, Haryanto. Well, there were actually two main reasons we did the book. The first one was in the early days of COVID, I was overseeing the coverage in the newsroom. So I attended quite a few of those briefings by MCI, by MOH, and I could see how stressed out all these public servants were. And I also oversaw some specials we did on frontliners, for example, and I did some stories myself. And I remember contact tracers, and I remember the sort of stress they were going through. So one of the reasons we decided to do the book was as a tribute to the frontliners. And this kind of leads on to the second reason. I was thinking to myself, as journalists, what can we do to help in this pandemic effort? And I thought what we do best, which is to chronicle news events, could be put together into a book so that we would put on record this very pivotal moment in our history for future generations. You also asked how different the book is from other books on COVID. I think the main one is that it's told through a journalistic lens. So everything is very factual. It's been fact-checked a gazillion times. It's also written by expert specialists from the newsroom. So we have people like Salma Khalid, who wrote a chapter on hospitals. We have Audrey Tan, who wrote a chapter on the science behind the virus. Yeah, so I think that makes it a bit special.
On that, Timothy, you contributed a fair bit to this project as well. What's the hardest part of writing the book?
Thanks, Haryanto. I mean, quite honestly, I think one of the hardest parts was trying to keep up with all the constant changes, because the book is rather static. And I remember initially we were hoping to publish the book at the start of 2021. So when we did our interviews at the end of 2020, all the people we spoke to, there was a certain triumphant kind of sense that yes, COVID was difficult, but look, we have gone through the year and we have beaten it, and now the worst is behind us. Let's look back and reflect on this. Unfortunately, as we all know, things worsened a lot in 2021. And as a result, every time there was a change in policy or case numbers spiked, we had to adjust our stories accordingly. And so that meant rewriting entire stories, coming up with new stories, trying to crunch down old ones, getting rid of things that were no longer relevant. And we had to repeat this process, I think, about 4 or 5 different times. Every time we thought, okay, things are better now, we can publish. Cases would rise again, and we would have to redo everything all over again. It was an extremely, extremely tedious process.
And Tim, what is it like to have worked on so many COVID-19 stories over the past 2 years, involving many segments in society?
Well, it's kind of surreal, actually. I actually remember the first time, in the first few weeks of the pandemic, when we all thought that this was going to be like SARS and it was going to be over in a couple of months. And, back then we thought the impact would be mostly limited to maybe tourists and the healthcare sector. But as things went on and on and on, we realized that really this is a virus that hit every single person from every walk of life, no matter if you're a minister, a migrant worker, a hawker, some rich tycoon, everyone is affected in some way. Now, obviously, through speaking to many different groups of people, we also realized that there are some inequalities that were brought up by the pandemic. It's obviously a lot more difficult to be a migrant worker in this pandemic, for instance, or someone living in a small rental flat. But that being said, when we spoke to even the MTF, who always appear so confident in front of people, to the various policymakers who seem to be making these firm, decisive moves, and when talking to them, we find out about these private concerns and fears they had, and how close we may have come to failure at some points. And you see the tiredness on everybody's faces. You realize that really, at the end of it, we are all just human beings trying to get through these unprecedented times together.
Sumiko, similar experience for you as well. And on that note, of course, the pandemic is still ongoing. So how do you produce a book that doesn't have an ending yet?
Yeah, like what Tim said, one of the biggest challenges was how the pandemic kept on going, and we couldn't stop the book we couldn't find a good window to put the book out. In the end, we decided that we had to put it out. We thought that 2 years, looking back on the first 2 years, would be a good milestone. So we had to cut off somewhere. So we decided to cut off around November. And I remember when we were putting the sort of finishing touches to the book, Omicron started. And then we were thinking like, oh dear, do we have to stop work again? But we decided to write it such that Omicron could play out both ways, either it was serious or not serious. And then we wrapped the book up.
And Sumiko, just to round out our discussion today, can we expect perhaps a sequel?
You got to ask him and the rest. I think it did take quite a lot out of us, wouldn't you say, Tim?
I shuddered when he suggested it, yes.
Yes.
Well,
but
thank you so
if
much,
things
Sumiko.
really do end well, yeah, why not? We could do a part 2.
Well, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Sumiko and Timothy, for the sharing. That was Sumiko Tan, Executive Editor at the Straits Times, and Timothy Goh, our health correspondent. Thank you both. In This Together, Singapore's COVID-19 story is available in major bookstores from today for $28. You can also order a copy at stbooks.sg. Now, we'll love to hear what you think of it.